The rain had just started when Alina stepped out of the taxi and looked up at the tall glass building in front of her. The silver letters on the front read Hartwell International. She adjusted the strap of her laptop bag and took a slow breath. "Just a business meeting," she whispered to herself. She had repeated those words all morning. 3 weeks earlier, her small marketing firm had received an email invitation for a partnership discussion with Hartwell International, one of the largest logistics companies in the country. For a small company like hers, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Still, something about the meeting made her uneasy. Maybe it was because the invitation had been strangely personal. Instead of coming from an assistant or HR department, the email had been signed directly by the CEO. Daniel Hartwell. Alina had Googled him that night like anyone would. The results showed a powerful businessman in his mid-30s, known for turning a struggling family company into a billion-dollar empire. But she had only glanced at his photo for a second before closing the page. She didn't want to think about why his name felt familiar. The lobby doors slid open and warm air wrapped around her. The building smelled like polished marble and expensive coffee. Employees in suits moved confidently through the space. Alina walked to the reception desk. "I'm here for a meeting with Mr. Hartwell," she said. The receptionist immediately smiled. "Yes, Ms. Rivera, he's expecting you." Alina blinked. Expecting her? She hadn't even introduced herself yet. Before she could ask anything, a tall assistant appeared beside her. "Right this way." They walked toward the private elevators. Alina's heels echoed softly on the marble floor. Her heartbeat grew louder with every step. When the elevator doors closed, she glanced at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Black blazer, white blouse, hair neatly tied back. Professional calm. Exactly how she needed to be. The elevator stopped at the top floor. The assistant led her down a quiet hallway and stopped in front of large wooden doors. "Mr. Hartwell is inside." Alina nodded. "Thank you." The assistant left. For a moment, Alina stood alone. Her hand hovered over the door handle. "Just a meeting." She pushed the door open. The office was huge. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city skyline through the rain. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a long conference table sat in the center. But the chair at the head of the table was empty. Alina frowned slightly. "Hello." A voice answered from near the window. "I was wondering how long it would take you to recognize the place." She froze. Slowly, a man turned around. Dark suit, tall, confident posture. And then he smiled. The world seemed to stop. Because Alina knew that smile. Not from business articles. Not from company photos. But from a memory she had tried very hard to forget. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Daniel." He walked toward her calmly, as if this moment had been planned for years. "It's been a long time, Alina." Her mind raced. 10 years. 10 years since the last time she had seen him. Back when they were just two university students with big dreams and empty wallets. Back when he used to bring her cheap coffee every morning and sit beside her in the campus library. Back when his smile had meant something very different. Alina felt her chest tighten. What is this?" she asked. Daniel stopped a few feet away. "A meeting," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "You knew it was me." "Yes." "You invited my company because of me." "Yes." The calmness in his voice only made her more frustrated. "Why?" Daniel studied her face quietly, like he was searching for something. "You disappeared," he said. The words hit her like a stone. "I didn't disappear," she replied sharply. "You did. You left first." Silence filled the office. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Daniel exhaled slowly. You never answered my calls. Alina's hands tightened around her laptop bag. You never came back. His jaw tensed slightly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them carried 10 years of unfinished conversation. Finally, Alina stepped forward and placed her laptop on the conference table. Let's keep this professional, she said firmly. Daniel's smile returned. But this time it was softer. I was hoping you'd say that. She sat down. So, she said, opening her laptop, let's talk business. Daniel pulled out the chair across from her. But instead of sitting immediately, he looked at her again. And that familiar smile appeared once more. The same one she had seen on a warm summer evening 10 years ago. The night everything had changed. Alina suddenly realized something that made her stomach twist. This was never just a business meeting. And maybe it never had been. Alina forced herself to focus on the presentation slides glowing on her laptop screen. Our company specializes in digital brand repositioning, she explained calmly. We help traditional corporations modernize their image and reach younger markets. Daniel sat across from her, listening carefully. Or at least pretending to. Because every few minutes, his eyes drifted from the screen back to her face. It made her uncomfortable. Not because she was nervous about the meeting, but because those eyes still looked exactly the same. Sharp, curious, and annoyingly warm. Your growth numbers are impressive, Daniel said finally. They had to be, Alina replied. Small companies don't survive otherwise. He nodded. You built this from nothing. Pretty much. Daniel leaned back in his chair. I always knew you would. Alina paused mid-sentence. Let's stick to the presentation. He raised his hand slightly in surrender. All right. She continued explaining her strategy for Hartwell International's upcoming expansion into younger markets. It was a solid proposal. Weeks of preparation had gone into it. But the entire time, she could feel the past sitting quietly between them. 10 years ago, Daniel Hartwell had not been a CEO. He had been a stubborn, ambitious engineering student who worked 2 part-time jobs just to stay in school. And Alina had been the girl who helped him study for exams. They had spent endless nights in the university library, sharing instant noodles and dreaming about the future. Back then, Daniel used to say something that always made her laugh. One day, he would say confidently, I'm going to run the biggest company in the country. And I'm going to design your advertisements, she would reply. But life rarely follows the plans of 2 hopeful students. During their final year of university, Daniel's father had suddenly fallen ill. The Hartwell family company was collapsing under debt. Daniel had left campus almost overnight. He promised he would return after helping his family stabilize the business. But weeks turned into months. Months turned into silence. Eventually, Alina had stopped waiting. She finished her degree, moved to another city, and started building her own career. And now, 10 years later, here he was. The same smile. The same voice. Only the world around him had changed. Alina clicked to the final slide of her presentation. That concludes our proposal. Daniel looked at the screen, then back at her. So, she said, what do you think? Instead of answering, he stood up and walked toward the window. Rain continued sliding down the glass. I have a question, he said. This is a business meeting, remember. It's related. She crossed her arms. Fine. Daniel turned to face her. Why didn't you answer my messages? Alina stared at him. Seriously? Yes. Her frustration rose quickly. You disappeared for 6 months. I told you why. You told me you'd be back in a few weeks. My father was dying, Alina. The room fell silent. She looked away. I know, she said quietly. Daniel's voice softened. I tried calling you when everything settled down. You sent 2 messages. I sent more than 20. Alina frowned. That's impossible. I thought you blocked me. And I thought you forgot me. They both stared at each other, confusion slowly replacing anger. Alina reached into her bag and pulled out her old phone. It was the same number she had used for years. I changed phones that year, she said slowly. Maybe the messages didn't transfer. Daniel laughed softly, shaking his head. 10 years, he said. 10 years of misunderstanding. Alina felt something heavy shift in her chest. All those nights she had spent believing he simply chose his company over her. All those times she convinced herself she meant nothing to him. And now, life is strange, Daniel said quietly. She looked at him again. The confident CEO image suddenly felt thinner. Underneath it, she could still see the same stubborn young man from the library. Why invite me now? She asked. He smiled again. That's actually the real reason for this meeting. Her stomach tightened slightly. I'm listening. Daniel walked back to the table. We're launching a global rebrand next year, he said. It's the biggest project our company has ever done. Alina nodded. That's what the email mentioned. But that's not the only reason I wanted to work with your firm. She raised an eyebrow. Then what is? Daniel looked directly at her. Because I spent 10 years building this company. He paused. And I always imagined you standing beside me when it happened. Alina's breath caught. The rain outside suddenly sounded louder. You're mixing business with old memories, she said carefully. Maybe. That's dangerous. Maybe. She closed her laptop slowly. Daniel, people change. Yes. 10 years is a long time. He smiled gently. Your smile still does the same thing, he said. Her cheeks warmed unexpectedly. That's not a professional observation. No, he agreed, it is. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Alina stood up. If this partnership moves forward, she said, it will be because my company deserves it. Daniel nodded. That's the only reason I'd accept. She picked up her bag. I should go. He walked with her to the door. When she reached the handle, she hesitated. Then she asked the question she had been afraid of since the moment she walked into the office. Are you married? Daniel smiled again. The same familiar smile. No. Alina opened the door. Good, he said softly behind her. She paused. Why? His voice followed her into the hallway. Because I'd like to ask you out after our next meeting. Alina didn't sleep much that night. Her mind kept replaying the moment in the office. The rain. The skyline. And that smile. 10 years had passed, yet somehow Daniel Hartwell still had the strange ability to turn her thoughts into chaos. She tried to focus on practical things. The contract proposal. The marketing strategy. The potential growth for her company. But every time she closed her laptop, the past quietly returned. Back in university, Daniel had been the kind of person who believed impossible things were simply problems waiting to be solved. If he failed an exam, he studied twice as hard. If he lost money in a project, he found another way. And when he fell in love, he had been just as stubborn. Alina remembered the day he first confessed. They had been sitting on the grass outside campus after a long exam week. He had brought 2 cups of cheap coffee and suddenly said, I think I'm in trouble. Why she had laughed. Because I can't imagine my future without you in it. At the time, she thought it was sweet. Young, naively romantic. But life had interrupted that future. Or so she believed. The next morning, Alina arrived at her office earlier than usual. Her small team of 6 employees slowly filtered in, greeting her with curious smiles. "Big meeting yesterday," her assistant Maya asked. Alina nodded. "And still processing." Maya leaned on the desk. "Is it true you met the actual Daniel Hartwell?" "Yes." "And—" Alina hesitated. "He remembered me." Maya's eyes widened. "Wait, you knew him before?" "University." Maya gasped dramatically. "Are you serious?" Alina laughed. "It's not a movie plot, Maya. Actually, it sounds exactly like one." Alina tried to ignore the comment. But by noon, a notification appeared on her phone. Daniel Hartwell. Her heart skipped slightly. The message was simple. Lunch, strictly business. Alina stared at it for a long moment. Then she replied, "Fine." An hour later, she walked into a quiet restaurant near the river. Daniel was already there. When he stood up to greet her, that familiar smile appeared again. And somehow, it didn't feel uncomfortable anymore. They ordered lunch and started discussing the partnership again. This time, the conversation felt easier, more natural. Daniel asked thoughtful questions about her strategies. She challenged some of his company's outdated marketing ideas. At one point, he laughed. "You always argued with me like this in college. Because you were always wrong. I became a billionaire. That doesn't prove you were right." They both laughed. For the first time since the meeting, the tension faded. After lunch, they walked outside toward the riverbank. The sky had cleared. Sunlight reflected on the water. Daniel leaned against the railing. "So," he said, "about yesterday. The business proposal." "Partly." Alina crossed her arms. "You also mentioned a date." "Yes." She studied him carefully. "You're serious?" "Very. You're a CEO with a schedule booked 6 months in advance. And I run a company that barely sleeps." He shrugged. "Sounds compatible." Alina laughed softly. "You haven't changed." "I hope not." A gentle breeze moved across the water. Finally, she asked the question that had been sitting quietly in her mind. "If those messages had reached me, do you think things would have been different?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes." She looked down at the river. "Me too." He stepped a little closer. "But here's the strange part," he said. "What? If everything had gone perfectly, maybe we wouldn't be the people we are now." Alina considered that. 10 years ago, they had been students with dreams. Now they were 2 people who had fought their own battles and built their own lives. Maybe timing really did matter. She looked at him again. "So what now?" Daniel smiled. Now it wasn't just familiar. It felt like something new. "Now we start with dinner," he said. "And after that, we see if the next 10 years are better than the last." Alina shook her head, smiling despite herself. "You're still optimistic." "Always." She took a slow breath. Then she said something she hadn't expected to say when she first walked into that office. "All right." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "All right, what?" "Dinner." His smile widened. And for the first time in 10 years, Alina realized something surprising. Maybe that business meeting had never really been about business at all. Maybe it was simply the moment 2 unfinished stories found their way back to each other.